Okay, this is the second of our Unit 2 lectures. Now we're talking about different types of experiments and how we need to have a control group as well as an experiment group. Otherwise, there's no telling if what we're using has any influence over people that are being experimented on. So you have to have an experimental group and you have to have a control group, otherwise you can't tell anything. These are called controlled experiments. They're the only kind that are worth anything. The rest of them are pretty much useless. All right, now, something that's very important in psychology and pretty much all medicine is a placebo effect. It's when a person does something different or gets better because they receive something that they think they would. Years ago, my great-grandmother was, in her 90s, and she had outlived most all of her doctors. So she gets this new doctor, and he says, I tell you what, I don't know what medications you're on, so bring in all your medication. And she brings this entire box of pills in. She took a pill in the morning, she took a pill before breakfast, she took a pill for lunch. I mean, she took pills, pills, pills all day long. So he looked over all of these pills and said, we've got one pill now that will replace this half of this box. So he gave her a prescription for one pill, and all it was a placebo. It was just a sugar pill. And she swore that it was this new miracle drug, but in actuality all it was just a sugar pill. Because all these other drugs have been forcing her to, one was picking her up, the other one was pushing her down, and so they were fighting against each other in her system, so this placebo took care of all that. If you've seen the movie Space Jam with Michael Jordan, they drink special water and all of them work. All of them play much better because they think they've got this special water. Or if you've ever seen Dumbo, the movie about the elephant, he thinks he can fly because he's holding onto these feathers that these crows gave him. In actuality, it was his big ears that allowed him to fly and had nothing to do with the feather. But it's the placebo effect. Now, in order to do a really quality study, you have to have a blinded study. You can't just perform something and everybody knows what's going on and expect to see something. Now, there's single blinds and there's double blinds. In a single blind study, the participants don't know whether they're a control group or an experimental group. Now, that's a good step in the right direction. But a double-blind study eliminates the researcher bias. In other words, we don't look at them different or look for special things because we don't know as researchers whether they're experimental or whether they are the control group. For example, let's say that they loosen up things at central office and they said, hey, we need to have a party. So we take two freshman classes and we wheel a keg of beer into each one of them. In one of them we have real beer. In the other one we have O'Doul's or some kind of artificial beer. It tastes like beer, just doesn't have any alcohol in it. I'd be willing to bet that within a half an hour we wouldn't be able to tell the difference between the two groups because the kids that were drinking the fake stuff would be acting like they're supposed to be drunk. But as researchers, now if we're single blind, that means we knew which group was which. We'd be looking at them going, look at those stupid freshmen. They don't know what's going on. Now, that means we would have a bias, or we would be looking for certain things going, well, they're not real stuff, so, that wouldn't make any sense. Why are they doing it? Why are they acting so stupid? But if we were blinded, in other words, it's a double-blind study, then we could have an honest opinion, and then afterwards, after we've drawn our conclusions, then somebody could say, okay, here's what the real scoop was. These people had this, these people had this. So that is a researcher bias, so we have to have a double-blind study. Okay, now let's talk about parapsychology a little bit. This is a different type of psychology. It goes beyond the main area of psychology. Now, it's not very scientific. None of the stuff we're going to talk about here has ever been proven in a double-blind study. Okay, the first thing is psychokinesis, or some people call it telekinesis. It's when the thoughts of an individual can affect a physical object or event. If you stare at something long enough, you can move an object across the table, or maybe you turn the lights on with your mind. It's psychokinesis, sometimes called telekinesis, seen in a lot of movies, especially like X-Men type movies, but It really doesn't work. We've never double-blind proven that anybody can do it. The next thing is extrasensory perceptions, more commonly called ESP. It's when knowledge is gained independently of known senses. In other words, I know something's going on. Like we're sitting in class and I know, oh my gosh, I bet there was a car wreck out front. Sure enough, there's a car wreck. That's ESP. It's when you know things are happening. Now, occasionally, if you've got a best friend, your bestie, that you do everything with, somebody will say something, you look at each other, and you swear that you say the exact same thing at the same time, or start laughing all at once. That is sometimes referred to as telepathy, but it's not. We can't prove it in a double-blind study. Telepathy is when you transfer thoughts from one person to another without the basic senses. In other words, you're not looking at them, you can't hear them, you can't have any signals or anything like that. If I were to give a telepathic lecture, I'd stand in the front of the class, everybody else would sit there, I'd think about it, they'd understand what I was saying, and we'd have to do the whole lecture without saying a word. Never has it ever been proven. The next thing is hypnosis. It's an unusual state of consciousness, similar to sleep, but vulnerable to suggestions. Now, hypnosis, I'm not saying it's not real, but it's just not very scientific. People have been hypnotized. I mean, we brought in a hypnotist years ago into school in that little time period in the beginning of arena scheduling where we have to keep the freshmen busy. Well, we had a hypnotist come in and hypnotize about 5 or 6 kids. And he had them doing all kinds of crazy stuff. He told them their foot was nailed to the floor so they couldn't move it, and sure enough, the kids could not move it. He told them they were chickens and they were walking around like chickens. Did all kinds of crazy stuff. He put post-hypnotic suggestions in there, so when he said a key word, this one girl would get up and yell and scream in the middle of everybody else, or and scream something really stupid in the middle of the class. It was very funny, and hypnotists, they're out there, and they seem to work. They work a lot better with people who have very addictive personalities, people who smoke, people who have certain addictions. They hypnotize people with a flashing light. It's anything that's rhythmic, a sound or an object, a tick, 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 or maybe you have to be able to focus on whatever they're doing. In the old movies, they would have like a swinging watch that they would swing back and forth and they would fall asleep. You can't differentiate between what's real and what's not. Sometimes you can recall past facts. Let's say the person behind you this morning at a convenience store when you were getting coffee robbed the store. Now, you probably looked at their face, but don't remember it because it's not important to you. Well, if the police department had a hypnotist, they could take you back and you could see that face just as clear as day because it's in your memory. You just can't pull it out because you're not forced to. So hypnosis could do that for you. Some people use it to get rid of pain. Some people use it as an anesthetic. They've actually operated on people that were under hypnosis. Personality disturbances, for example, people that need to quit smoking, that craving for nicotine, whenever you feel that, they put this suggestion in there that makes you sick to your stomach. So you get rid of those cravings. Or people that are eating too much. They have an eating disorder, so they get rid of those cravings to eat. Maybe to find a lost article. Let's say you set your wedding ring down and it costs $10,000 and they will take you back to that point where you last remember having it and then proceed forward from there so that you could find the ring. So, like I said, a lot of this parapsychology stuff is just a bunch of hooey. That's what the scientists feel about it. And it's never been proven in a double-blind controlled setting. So if somebody could do it, there'd be a lot of money out there for them. So that would be pretty impressive. So that is the end of our lecture. So hopefully this next unit runs a little bit smoother than the last one. I'm sorry if you had problems. Please email me if you have any questions or issues.